Welcome back to TCM, Professor Kimberly Crenshaw.
I'm pleased to be here.
So pleased to have you here. You are a professor of law at UCLA and Columbia University, and also you're the executive director and co-founder of the African American Policy Forum.
Yes.
So it means so much to have you here on Juneteenth to talk about artists who are back talkers.
Yes.
The name, actually, of your new memoir, Back Talker, An American Memoir. Congratulations on the publication.
Thank you.
So let's talk about back talking. We're going to do that by continuing to discuss Black artists who were blacklisted for their political beliefs and their activism.
Yes.
And this next figure is such an important figure to discuss, Lorraine Hansberry.
Yes, a hero.
An absolute hero and a Chicago woman, which is very close to my heart. We're going to watch A Raisin in the Sun, which is the adaptation of her extraordinary Broadway play. A Raisin in the Sun was the first play on Broadway written by an African-American woman.
Right.
Let's talk about Lorraine Hansberry's background and what led her to create this really important work.
Yeah, and this is one of the artists that I actually get to talk about in my civil rights class. Because the play was inspired by real life events that happened to her family. They moved into an all-white neighborhood. There was a restrictive covenant that was attached to the property. And because the restrictive covenant, these were contracts that white homeowners would sign with each other to agree never to sell, primarily to Black people, but some also apply to Asians, to Jews.
That's right.
Basically to keep neighborhoods, shall we say, monochromatic. Her father bought a home, and there was an effort to actually expel them from the home by saying that they did not legally own the property because of the restrictive covenant. So that began a multi-year litigation campaign that her father waged to be able to own their own home.
And that case went all the way to the Supreme Court, didn't it?
It did go all the way to the Supreme Court. They did win, but on a technicality. So even after that case was successful, restrictive covenants were still, broadly used all across the country. It wasn't until 1948 when restrictive covenants were finally ruled to be unconstitutional.
Well, this film has a cast that pretty much replicates the cast on Broadway. Sidney Poitier is Walter Lee.
Yes.
Claudia McNeil plays Lena Younger, the matriarch of the family. The great Ruby Dee is in this film. Diana Sands playing Benitha, the sister. And there are so many ways that the film echoes what we can imagine the play looked like.
Exactly.
But Lorraine Hansberry wrote the screenplay, another first for a Black woman, and she really wanted to take the film outside of this kitchenette apartment, but didn't really get the opportunity to do that. The decision was made to keep it pretty much the same. But the kitchenette apartment as the site of this story, it helps to explain the dynamic that you're talking about, this desire of Black families to own their own homes, to have more space. A lot of that had to do with the fact that the Black community was restricted to such a small area. Could you talk more about how that kind of redlining kept Black communities so hemmed in and overcrowded?
This wasn't simply a matter of white people choosing to live one place and Black people choosing to live somewhere else. It was a product of laws that made it difficult, if not impossible, for Black people, even if they could afford to live in other white neighborhoods, to buy. It was a product of insurance that made it difficult to insure neighborhoods that were seen as being mixed neighborhoods. It was the product of the United States government participating in identifying some neighborhoods as green. Those were all white. The ones that were not all white or were Black, those were red. And that's what redlining means. You draw a marker around certain neighborhoods and you preclude them from being able to gather resources to improve their neighborhoods, to get mortgages, or to actually capitalize off of their investment so that they can move up the real estate ladder. We still live in the aftermath of this. So this play is a marker. Yes, it's a historical play, but it's still telling us a lot about why many of our neighborhoods look the way they do today.
Absolutely, yes. What a broad critique that she's making about these conditions. And not only that, the play and the film also talk about Black relations, African American and African relations.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's the play in particular really gets into this question of identity, into Pan-Africanism. I remember when I played Beneatha, in junior high school,
Okay,
right?
yes.
The challenging scene for me was, putting on African garb and, performing an African dance. But that was sort of a important moment because she, like Paul Robeson, had a vision about the connection of our struggles, and that was front and center in that scene and in her consciousness.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Professor
you.
Crenshaw. Let's take a look from 1961. Here is Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun. Back with us to discuss A Raisin in the Sun is Professor Kimberly Crenshaw. You have a new memoir called Back Talker, an American Memoir. You know, Lorraine Hansberry, she got in trouble for her beliefs. There was an FBI file on her.
Yes.
We primarily remember her for A Raisin in the Sun, but she did much more writing in her short life. She died at the age of 34.
Yes,
That she wrote this play before the age of 30 is just staggering. But she did many other things, her writings, her thinking on many issues.
And essays.
Yes.
Essays, stances. It is the reason why J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI kept a file on her for 17 years. But here's the interesting thing. No one thought Lorraine Hansberry was going to go out and do something violent. No one thought that she was going to overthrow the government. It was the power of the pen, the strength of her ideas, the convincingness of her narrative that was so threatening to her. So it tells us a lot about censorship. It tells us a lot about blacklisting, which is what I call that. This is basically your ideas are too dangerous for us to be comfortable with. So despite all of the things we want to say we believe about freedom of speech and freedom of thought, your freedom has to be contained based on our comfort level with what you're saying. And that's a fundamental contradiction that goes to the core of how we can have a society in which we've had these bouts of censorship while at the same time saying we're all about freedom and liberty.
Yes. And the particular dangers that a Black woman writer, and now we know from writings that have been uncovered that she was also a queer artist as well.
That's right. So she covered many different spaces and spoke to those spaces in ways that were actually quite moving, quite powerful, quite convincing. That was what caused her to, give headaches to the J. Edgar Hoovers of the world. And it's one of the reasons why, although the blacklisting period might not have constrained her as much as Paul Robeson, she herself was pressured to try to distance herself from Paul Robeson, and she refused to do it.
You famously coined the term intersectionality. And I think talking about Lorraine Hansberry is a really ripe opportunity for you to tell us more about that concept.
Yeah. Well, it's basically just a simple framework or prism for understanding the ways that discrimination or inequality on the basis of race or on the basis of gender or any other characteristic often overlap. They often exacerbate each other. Lorraine Hansberry was a Black queer woman. She likely faced barriers and obstacles that someone who was not all of those things faced in a different way. Not that they didn't have any obstacles, but when they come together, many times they are difficult to identify and even harder to call people to one's defense. So being an African-American woman many times means that you experience sexism in a way that's very different from the way white women experience sexism. And you experience racism sometimes in a way that's very different from the way Black men experience racism. So intersectionality is just calling our attention to all of these ways that when discrimination becomes compounded, it's that much more difficult to identify and address.
Oh, thank you so much, Professor Crenshaw.
Thank you for having me.
Please stay right here, because coming up next, we're going to be talking about another blacklisted Black artist. It's Canada Lee in Cry, the Beloved Country.